Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
We have two guests on today's show. First, we are pleased to welcome Pennsylvania Senator Greg Rothman, who just recently was elected as the Republican Party chairman of Pennsylvania. Greg has been a guest many times, and we have seen the extraordinary arc of his political career firsthand. I find myself conflicted as to whether I should address him as senator or chairman. When I first was introduced to Greg, he had been a member in leadership of Pennsylvania's House of Representatives, serving as deputy chair of the House Policy Committee, as well as serving, very importantly, as chairman of the House Republican Campaign Committee. He was instrumental in the House Republicans having a majority in Pennsylvania and being in the majority, something that is not the case today. After a number of terms in the House, Greg ran for Senate, winning, moving quickly to reprise his role from the House days, but this time as chairman of the Senate Republican Campaign Committee. Now, he is ascended to chairman of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, still, though, as a senator. Prior to his public service, Senator Rothman served in the Marine Corps during Operation Desert Storm. Afterward, he served 10 years in the Marine Corps Reserve. His military service led to his appointment by the President of the United States, George W. Bush, to the National Veterans Business Development Corporation. Greg was born in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He graduated from Cumberland Valley High School and then received his political science degree from the University of Massachusetts. He would later go on to receive his master's degree from Johns Hopkins University. Also joining us on today's show was last week's guest, Vince Galko. You'll remember he's the newly managing director of Mercury Public Affairs. We will be discussing Senator Rothman's priorities as midterms and the governor's race loom on the horizon.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Vince, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Great to be back, Chuck.
And I'll have to do a salute to our United States Marine guest, Pennsylvania Senator Greg Rothman, and now newly minted chairman of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, Senator Greg Rothman. So, Greg, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Pleasure. I want to start on this primary part of this show is your ascension to the chairmanship of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania. Vince, you know him a long time. I met the senator through you, so your comment on your friend and in his rise, because I'm sure you've been a part of his discussions and his thinking.
Sure. Well, I mean, the party's in great hands with Chairman Rothman. Certainly, he's, as you said, a Marine, but also a very accomplished businessman, a great father, great family man, but he's also a good friend. So the background he has bringing to the party leadership is second to none. I first met Greg in the fall of 2005, I believe. No, 2003. I'm sorry, we met.
Wow.
And we needed a chair for the Bush-Cheney campaign in Cumberland County. And a friend of mine says, "I got just a guy for you, Greg Rothman." And we hit it off right off the bat. He was an unbelievable chair for the Bush campaign, and we worked on campaigns together, Rick Santorum's and others. So
sure,
we've been good friends, both professionally and personally, for many years. And I'm thrilled to have him in that position.
So let me go, Greg, immediately to, because this is our first actual show with you since you became chairman. With all of your responsibilities and success and all that you're doing inside the party of the Senate to keep your majority, you know, you woke up one morning. I asked my guests this because I had the same thing. I look in the mirror. I woke up one morning when I decided to run for governor and do various things. You woke up one morning and decided, I'm going to become the chairman of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania. What was your thinking? And what your motivation, effectively? Why did you decide to take that step from your pretty exalted position in Senate leadership?
Yeah, I look, it's the same reason I joined the Marine Corps. I mean, the same reason, I left a pretty comfortable life and a pretty good business. Probably the same reason people like President Trump left a pretty cushy life and a successful business. It's about service, Chuck. Our Commonwealth and our country needs leadership right now. The party the Republican Party is coming off the greatest election in my lifetime, and yet we're faced with tremendous challenges. And as you said, Pennsylvania is the Keystone State. And I want to make sure that it is a red state, just like it was in 2024 in the presidential election and winning all those statewide elections. But there's still more work to be done. And it's because I love my Commonwealth and I love my country. And that's how I was raised. And that's why I joined the Marine Corps. And that was one of the greatest things I ever did. And I got way more out of the Marine Corps than it got out of me. And public service is truly, to me, that's what it is. It's about a sacrifice. And I say that there's no comparison between what I'm doing and what the men and women who put their lives on the line, either as military or first responders. But yet, this is a tough job. There were times when I was in the Marine Corps, I thought, why am I doing this? But I also knew this is where I'm supposed to be. And we need leadership, and our party's at that crossroads. And I think that all my life experiences in politics, I was a leader in the teenage Republicans, the college Republicans, the young Republicans. I've worked on lots of elections, including presidential elections, and I know how to win. And that's why I think I'm in this spot. But it wasn't something I was thinking about or planning for. It was an opportunity that came up.
Well, Vince, I'll turn it over to you to ask a question because of your association with Greg, because you have some more Republican, knowledge in it that I'm still acquiring. So,
yeah, well, I think the chairman has made it clear that he has certain priorities, and let him enumerate what they are. But voter registration is top of the order. We have competitive judge races this year. Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft and Matt Wofford from Erie need to get them elected to a Commonwealth and Superior Court this year. So I'm happy to work with Greg on these issues, and he's assembling a great team right now, a great leadership team as well. And we have, certainly folks like Senator McCormick, Congressman Dan Muser, other people who are pitching in to help the campaign, help the party as well. So I know I'll let Chairman Rothman kind of enumerate some of his goals.
To you.
Well, Chuck, the guy sitting next to you, I think, is the smartest person in Republican politics in all of Pennsylvania. And he won races for, Pat Toomey and Rick Santorum back when there was 1.5 million more Democrats than Republicans. Well, now we're close to 100,000. And so one of our goals is to get parity in voter registration, to have just as many Republicans as Democrats. That's the top of our list, because that puts us in a foundation to then win elections and building on the success we just had, promoting President Trump's agenda, and also, being an opposition to our current governor, who is not a moderate like he tries to pretend to be, and is not unbeatable. I think Josh Shapiro can be beaten in 2026, and my job is to make sure that the Republican Party has a foundation and has the infrastructure in place that we can run a campaign, a grassroots campaign that can defeat Josh Shapiro in 2026. But as Vince said, we have to win some judicial races too, and we've got 3 Supreme Court justices that are coming up for retention. All 3 Democrats, all 3 activists, and I don't think they deserve a new 10-year term. So I'm urging people to vote no on those judges, while voting yes on our Superior Court and Commonwealth Court judges, Anne-Marie Wheatcraft and Matt Wofford.
Well, yeah, well said. And, a couple of things. You mentioned registration. It is clear now that the Republican Party is riding a wave. We now have the United States congressional delegation is Republican majority now, which is a great. You have still a very solid majority in the Pennsylvania Senate. We now have all 3 row offices, and I hesitate to call them row offices. When I say row office, I think of like the county clerk of judicial records. Right. But when you talk about an Auditor General of Pennsylvania and an Attorney General of Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania State Treasurer, Dave Sunday, Attorney General, and of course Tim DeFore, Auditor General, and Stacey Garrity as the Treasurer, that's a clean sweep. That's never happened before when they were all elective offices. So as you look out there now with this momentum, do you think that's something that you're going to be able to tap into and build on with the races you've identified coming up?
Yeah, we have to, and I think President Trump's policies are having results. I mean, there's virtually no, it's crickets at the borders, no illegal crossings of our southern border. The price of eggs down 60-70%, and that's all we heard about was the prices. Inflation's a tax, an evil, insidious tax on the working people of Pennsylvania, and inflation is down. And in addition to that, if you think about what's going on with the price of gas, look at the price of gas going down. So his policies are making a difference both at home and abroad. We've got issues going on with the stock market, but the reality is that half of the people in Pennsylvania don't have any money in the stock market, and yet they do have to buy eggs and gas every week. So I think we'll be rewarded with that, but we have to be vigilant, and we can't be complacent and say just because we won the White House, we don't have to worry about our state house.
Well, I'd like to get your take on this, Vince. The chairman mentioned that there's vulnerability in Josh Shapiro. And I've been doing shows and views on just that point. He gets elected in 2022 talking, and this, Greg, as well, talking about I'm supporting school choice and I'm supporting oil and gas drilling and natural gas, Marcellus Shale, and opposing Reggie. And of course, he gets elected governor. And in fact, it's a scam. He didn't oppose or didn't support school choice. He line item vetoed it. If Josh Shapiro had been truly for school choice, he could have got, as governor, that the few recalcitrant House people in line, there are only a few they had to change. So that was a lie, first of all. Then, of course, and again, he's a lawyer and he's clever this way. He says, well, I didn't actually lie about I was not going to support oil and gas, but I had to appeal Reggie just to protect the power of the office. Reggie, of course, as you both know, is the regional greenhouse gas initiative that puts a cap and trade system and a tax on all Pennsylvanians to take our own oil, which should be lowering their taxes and their price of energy instead of increasing it. So he has lied and he has lied. And while he has, by the way, sent his own children to private school. So
yeah, hey, Chuck, it's even worse than that. We gave him a budget. It passed the House and the Senate with scholarships to rescue the kids that are in the worst schools. And he line item or blue line vetoed out of the budget that had already passed. I mean, he could have let it go into law.
Yeah.
But look, he also campaigned on accelerating the corporate net income tax cuts that was my bill in the House and Governor Wolf signed, and has had a positive effect on attracting businesses. He campaigned and said he would accelerate it. In his State of the Budget speech, he said, well, I'll agree to lower it, but we're going to include combined reporting, which is double taxation, and nobody wants combined reporting. I mean, that's as if you made money in Pennsylvania and Ohio and you had to pay taxes in both places. That's not fair. We've never supported combined reporting. So we've got to lower our tax rates to attract businesses to Pennsylvania. And we also need to do something about our regulatory climate and our permits. So we're going to miss out on the manufacturing boom of all these foreign countries, foreign manufacturing facilities coming back into the United States because of the tariffs. If they're not going to come to Pennsylvania, if we don't do something about our tax rates and our permit problems and our regulatory structures.
No question. And now, and by the way, at least in his past budget, he at least had something. And in fact, there was something that actually finally made it into the budget relative to tax credits and scholarships, which were, effectively to help private education and private school vouchers and things like that through a scholarship tax credit kind of thing. Well, he took them out of this budget.
He took them out of this budget.
There's nothing in this budget for that.
And look, if you liked what happened the last 4 years in America under Joe Biden, you will really like Josh Shapiro's budget, because he's brought the same fiscal irresponsibility. It's a $51.5 billion budget, a 7.5% increase over last year's record budget. It inflates optimistically inflates the revenues beyond what we know are going to come in, and it drains our reserves, our rainy day fund, and puts us in a place where when Josh Shapiro is running for president in 2028, we'll be in a $27 billion annual hole. That's more than half of the budget he's proposing. He's going to spend us into oblivion and then ride off into DC and forget about us. And so the Republicans in the Senate are standing up to us and saying no, and standing up to this budget and standing up to the governor. It's an irresponsible budget, similar to what happened under Biden. We're going to have, it's going to have the same chaos, where we're going to see record inflation and malaise, and that's what he's going to try to do to Pennsylvania. While we should be cutting tax rates and speeding up and accelerating tax rates and getting our spending under control. I think we need a Doge for Pennsylvania. There's just as much waste, fraud, and abuse in our programs as in the federal government. It's just on a smaller scale.
That might be something you suggest to the Republican nominee for governor. That might be a pretty strong campaign point. And on that, the master and expert of campaigning, as you've said, Vince Galko, your thoughts on that?
Well, I couldn't say any better than the chairman did, but I think, one thing I will say, and please forgive me for complimenting Josh Shapiro, but you have to admire the politician in him, right? He's purely Machiavellian.
Yes.
The ends justify the means.
Right.
He pledged to be a tough prosecutor. Well, the last 6 years, Pennsylvania's, crime and lawlessness has been through the roof. He pledged to be for students in the poorer districts. He abandoned them, right? He pledged to be for the natural gas industry in Pennsylvania. He abandoned them, and actually is working against them. I think what's happening right now is, though, it's all coming home to roost. He's got several scandals he's trying to put out within the administration.
We're going to get to those in a second.
And he's got people are realizing that he says one thing, does another. And I also think he's been fortunate. The years that he's faced a solid candidate, the party hasn't been as united, hasn't been as strong. And in other years, he maybe hasn't faced the strongest candidates. It's a perfect storm rising against him right now. People are certainly waking up to him. He's been around long enough now. They're getting a feel for who he is and what he does and what he says. And the party's, as we saw last November, and then with new leadership now, has never been stronger. So if I was Josh Shapiro, I'd be seriously concerned about his reelection efforts. And, the national spotlight is on him now. You saw what his party did to him when he was just mentioned to be vice president. The left of his party just tore him to pieces. And you saw, it reared its ugly anti-Semitic head and everything else. So I think he's got a lot of problems both nationally and at home. So it's ripe for the taking there in 2026.
All right. Back to you, Greg, on the something that he spurred me when he said that. We were talking about the budget items before and how he's flip-flopped and lied. Well, we were all feeling pretty strong that even though he didn't say he was against, or I'm sorry, he said, yes, he wasn't for Reggie, but he had to protect the power of the governor's office when he appealed the Commonwealth Court decision to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. But most observers feel like the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will find what the Commonwealth Court did. It's a tax, and he doesn't have authority that only is in you guys, the Senate and the House and the General Assembly. So what he did put in this budget now, so now he can't even say, oh, I just was going along with what Tom Wolf did. It's not my program, Reggie. He put in his budget something called PACER. The PACER is a cap and trade exclusively tailored for Pennsylvania. So now he's like, talk about doubling down and going lefter, running to the left instead of to the center. Your comment as a senator now on this PACER program.
Yeah, I watched his press conference. It is an AOC squad new Green Deal, which again, I mean, you talk about Pennsylvania as an energy producer. We have all this abundant, clean, affordable energy that we should be using to attract people to Pennsylvania and businesses to Pennsylvania and manufacturers to Pennsylvania. And the Pennsylvanians are suffering under these high Joe Biden inflation numbers, which is a tax. And now we're going to have a tax on energy, the thing that we all need. I mean, we don't tax necessities in Pennsylvania, right? I mean, we don't tax food or clothing or medicine because we understand that those things are necessities. And yet, what is more of a necessity than energy? I mean, I know we're heading into spring, but we've had cold winters, but we need those energies to keep the lights on and to keep our keep this country going, and we should be keeping the energy in the produce as much as we can in the Commonwealth, and we need to be exporting it, and becoming energy independent for a country so that we don't have to buy our oil from our enemies. And Josh Shapiro understands that if he wants to be president, that his party has a left wing. I think he's comfortable there anyway. And you're going to see more and more movements to the left. Just last week, it came out that he signed off on a $5 million grant to a mosque, an Islamic mosque that has a history of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic teachings and comments. I mean, that's how far he's willing to go to be president. And he cares way more about Pennsylvania Avenue than he does about Pennsylvania.
Well, you spurred something with that, Senator, in the sense that he's not the first one, a Jewish American, who has betrayed his religion, his faith, and his country. Chuck Schumer, Jewish Chuck Schumer, rose on the Senate floor, if you remember. This was in the aftermath of the devastating Hamas attack. I did a view on it, and pretty much scolded Israel, suggested that the country parliament overthrow Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, throw him out, make concessions to Hamas, and last but not least, try to suggest that the United States should leverage their power and their financial support of Israel unless they comply with his wish. I couldn't believe it. So normally I'd be shocked when you'd say Josh Shapiro would betray his faith in the only democratic republic, God knows, in the Middle East, Israel. But Chuck Schumer paved the way.
Well, and by the way, I mean, since Vince started by complimenting Governor Shapiro, I'll compliment our other senator, John Fetterman, who is standing up for Israel and for the President Netanyahu, and I think met with him, and because of it is facing, his wife's store in Braddock had vandalism, graffiti, anti-Semitic graffiti on it. This is John Fetterman, who is standing up for Israel because he understands that Israel is a great ally to the United States. When the enemies of Israel talk about little Satan, they also talk about great Satan, and we're the great Satan. So Israel is just the first line of defense. They're going to come after us secondly. So I think John Fetterman should be complimented, and Josh Shapiro should be ashamed.
Agreed. And one of the interesting questions, I'll turn to you, Vince, before Greg, we go back to Greg, your thoughts. The interesting thing is, when you're talking about, we understand the big issue with Reggie and now Pacer, is that it's effectively a tax. And at the end of the day, if it's any sort of a tax, only the General Assembly can do that. The executive cannot. So that's still an issue he'll have to overcome. I know he's tailored Pacer differently than Reggie is, but I still think that's going to be a problem. But here's another problem. I remember one of the things that was, I conceptually, it was kind of difficult for me to learn in law school, along with other people, the power of the Commerce Clause in our United States Constitution. And what we learned effectively is anything that has a chance to cross state lines becomes the purview of the federal government and interstate commerce, which gives them authority over it. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which got passed, promoted by President Kennedy, passed by President Johnson, everybody screamed, all these little boarding houses, why are they, covered by the Federal Civil Rights Act in rural Alabama? Well, they get dairy products, they use electricity, all things that come and originate from outside the state. Ergo, the Commerce Clause, ergo, the Civil Rights Act applies to boarding homes. Well, back to Josh Shapiro. We have a supremacy clause, of course, in the Constitution, which is a problem for them. How is our energy, which will be enjoyed clearly, and the impact, not only exporting it across state lines, but the impact of it will cross state lines, especially in the border of our Commonwealth. How does he comport himself with President Trump's executive order that said, drill, baby, drill, and open our energy and tap? Like, that's something no one's talking about, but I'd like your take.
Well, it just goes back to the duplicity of Josh Shapiro, right? Here we are in Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, the energy really at one time the energy capital of this country at one point, and still contains many, thousands of acres of energy resources.
Second biggest in the country. We are. Second biggest.
Right.
Go.
So, how does he tell that to Pennsylvanians? Vote for me for re-election, but you're not allowed to take, these resources out of the ground. You're not allowed to have cheaper energy bills. We're not allowed to bring manufacturing here because we have this energy. We're not allowed to sell it overseas because, Democrats in Washington don't want us to or are fighting to stop that. So how does he justify those two things? It's going to make it more and more difficult for him as November 2026 comes closer.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Greg, before we kind of winding down?
There's a real rift between the building trades, those hardworking men and women in the energy industry, whether it be our coal miners or our steel workers or our pipeline fitter or pipe fitters, who want to see us use our energy that God gave us in this Commonwealth, and the environmentalists who, they control the Republic, or that they control the Democratic Party. So that's why President Trump did so well. I mean, we were talking about, I heard you guys talking about it earlier. The president had all the coal workers with their mining hats and mining helmets on at the White House the other day for the ceremony. I mean, the private sector unions are voting for President Trump and the Republican Party now because they see us as the party of actual prosperity, and they see the Democratic Party as, the party of the environmentalists who want to, they want to fly around in their private jets. And by the way, the governor has abused the private airline, using private planes to fly around the country at the taxpayers' expense, and in some cases not properly logging them in. Senator Jared Coleman's, who is a pilot, has been working on this and exposing this. But they'll fly around on private jets and then try to tax and shut down your use of energy. It just shows hypocrisy. So we're excited, Chuck. It's going to be a great 2025, 2026. We have a plan, and we're going to build on the success of both President Trump and the party, and we're going to be the party of common sense. And I think that's why you joined us. You didn't come to the Republican Party; the Democratic Party left you.
And a lot of other people, Greg. I'll end. We're out of time. I'll end our show with this. There are a lot of indictments of the Democratic Party. Probably, to me, as a student of political history, as you both are, that's the most scathing and telling is Bobby Kennedy Jr., now Secretary Kennedy, telling me actually on this show, because he'd been a guest on this show, he said, Chuck, he said, my uncle, and he's referring to President John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and my father, also martyred, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., would not recognize today's Democratic Party. And I said in response, if there was a Mount Rushmore of Democratic great presidents, they would have, Franklin Roosevelt on that and others that would be on that. John Fitzgerald Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy Sr. are on that Mount Rushmore, and they would not recognize their party. There could be no greater indictment to me. They've lost common sense. They've lost working families, all the things that were the basic staple of their party. Well, again, Greg, Godspeed on your tenure as chairmanship of our party. I'll be doing my best to support you, as I always have, both in your role as senator and now chairman of our party. So good luck and Godspeed. Vince, final comment.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, looking forward to the chairman's tenure and accomplishing great things.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.